All right. So biodiversity, what is it exactly? We're talking about bio, meaning life again, okay, and then diversity, which just means different. So we're talking about different life. That's all we're talking about here. And so different life within an ecosystem. And what's going to happen here is the more different types of life you have, okay, the more different types of plants that you have, the more different types of frogs and things that are going to eat those plants and things that are going to eat the things that are eating the plants, that's going to allow your ecosystem to be very sustainable. Because if one of those organisms does not do very well, okay, like we talked about with the fish, if I only eat fish, okay, I'm not very diverse in what I'm eating, I'm going to have troubles if the fish go away or there's a bad year, all right, for the fish. Whereas if there are more options, okay, the food web is larger, okay, there's more diversity within an ecosystem, it's going to be way more sustainable. All right, it's going to be way more sustainable, allowing that ecosystem to flourish, even if a certain type of plant dies. Okay, the ecosystem is still going to be just fine because another plant or animal is going to fill that role very, very quickly. All right, and so that's just a sign of a healthy ecosystem, is when there is a ton of different types of life present. Okay, remember, life that is different. That's going to be biodiversity. All right, here we go. So moving into food chains. Food chains, all they're going to be, guys, is a sequence of organisms, all right, in order, kind of showing us what eats what. Now, I'm going to point this out right now. I'm going to point it out later as well. But these arrows, okay, they point to the thing that eats them. Okay, a pine cone gets eaten by a red squirrel. A red squirrel gets eaten by a weasel. A weasel gets eaten by a goshawk. A goshawk. Okay, the reason for the arrow is we are pointing with the energy flow. Energy flow. Where is the energy going? Because when the red squirrel eats the pine cone, the reason it's eating it is because it wants to get that energy. Okay, so red squirrel eats a pine cone to get its energy. A weasel is going to eat the, excuse me, let me just draw the arrow the correct way. The red squirrel is going to eat the weasel in order to get its energy, and the weasel is going to get eaten by the goshawk to get its energy. All right, and so basically, you can see in this diagram is our sun is going to give energy to the producers. Okay, the producers are going to be eaten by herbivores. Herbivores are being eaten by omnivores and by carnivores. Okay, so they are giving their energy to these. Carnivores will also eat other omnivores. I mean, bears also eat certain carnivores as well. So just something to keep in mind there. But then here is actually going to be our decomposers or our scavengers. Okay, and so our decomposers, they're going to break down when all of these organisms die. They're going to break them down into nutrients that then can be cycled back into the producers. Okay, so sun, air, wind, water, all the different nutrients that is needed for producers to undergo photosynthesis. So again, follow the arrow. The arrow is always pointing to what eats what. All right, the producer gets eaten by the deer. That's why we point from the grass to the deer. All right, let's keep on going. Keep on going. All right, so food chains. I want you to give it a shot. Try to put these in the correct order. So we're looking at grass. We're looking at snakes. We're looking at snails. We're looking at birds. I want you to make your own food chain. Just pause the video, create your own food chain, and then check in with me. So I'll wait. 3, 2, 1. All right, so hopefully you've made your own food chain. Let's just check our answer here. So what we need first is we need something to collect that energy from the sun. That's going to be our grass, okay? The grass is going to be our producer. It's going to produce all the all the glucose that the rest of our organisms are going to need. The thing that's going to eat the grass is going to actually be our snails, is the next thing you should have. Okay, snails are going to wind up eating our grass. what is going to eat our snails is going to be snakes, actually. And then finally, what's going to eat the snakes are going to be the hawks. Or excuse me, in this case, this example is saying that we're just going to say birds instead of hawks. Okay, but that's what I'm thinking in my head. Okay, so we have birds. Birds are going to eat the snakes. All right, what happens when one link is broken in a food chain? Okay, that's a great question. And so what's going to happen is, let's say we remove snails. Okay, so snails are taken out of the equation. Sorry, snails. All the snails die. Okay, there's a big disease going around. Okay, all the snails die, let's say. And so what's going to happen is there's no food for the snakes. Okay, so the population of the snakes is going to go down. Okay, the population of the snakes. So population. Okay, the population of the snakes are going to go down. That's also going to cause the population of the birds to go down because they have less snakes to eat. Okay, you can see how everything's affected, not only on the way where the energy is flowing, but also down here where the grass is. All right, what's going to happen to the grass? They don't have anything that eats grass anymore. All right, so what's going to happen to the population of the grass? The grass is going to flourish. They're going to love that. Okay, so the grass, there's going to be tons of grass everywhere. And so what happens is we really want to have a wide variety. We want to have biodiversity. Okay, because without biodiversity, if one thing gets taken out, our snails, our whole food chain is messed up. All right, our whole food chain's messed up. Whereas if we have a food web, which is the next thing we're going to talk about, which is a little bit more complicated version of a food chain, okay, now if the snails get taken out, something else can take its place, like grasshoppers, okay. All right, they're kind of sharing the grass, okay. There's not one thing that eats the grass. There's a ton of things that eat the grass. And so that way, snakes now have another source. The population still will go down for snakes because the resources are lower. Okay, the population will still go down for the birds because there'll be less snakes. But the ecosystem will be able to rebound much faster. All right, the ecosystem will be able to rebound. So let's keep on going. We're actually not going to talk about food webs. We're going to talk about trophic levels really quickly. So let me move myself down there. All right, here we go. The trophic level of an organism in an ecosystem depends on its feeding position. Okay, depends on its feeding position along a food chain. And so we've kind of been talking about this throughout the entire video, but basically our producers, okay, let me get my drawing utensil. Okay, producers, they're getting their energy from where? Yep, you're right, the sun. Okay, then they are going to give their energy to our consumers. Now we're just giving them a specific name. Okay, the herbivores, the ones that eat the plants, we call them primary consumers. Okay, we call them primary consumers. Whereas the ones that eat the primary consumers, the ones that eat the rabbits, okay, the grasshoppers, the cattle, the deer, okay, we're going to call them secondary consumers. All right. Now that can be a snake, that can be a rat, okay, that can be a multitude of different animals, but there is going to be one more stage, okay, above the secondary consumer, and the ones that eat the secondary consumers and they also eat the primary consumers. And if they were an omnivore, I know an owl is not an omnivore, but if they're an omnivore, they could potentially eat the producers as well. Okay, they can eat anything that you're on top of, you can eat below. All right, not typically tertiary consumers do not eat plants. Okay, but they could. All right, they could. And so what happens, as you can see, this energy, let me just erase this quickly. The energy flow, if you will, it flows from producers to our primary consumers. It flows from our primary consumers to our secondary consumers. And then when those things get eaten, it's going to flow to our tertiary consumers. Our tertiary consumers are going to be the king of the food chain. Okay. Or it'll be the top. of the food chain. Okay, the top. Okay, so something to keep in mind as we move forward. All right, here we go. Here's just our diagram a little bit closer. If you want to just take a look and maybe write yourself with your notes, this might be nice to use. All right, so let's talk more about food webs. Okay, so food webs, a representation of feeding relationships. Okay, we talked about this already a little bit. All right, food webs are going to be more complex food chains. Instead of just having one thing, and that one thing could be our tree is eaten by the moose, okay? And the moose is eaten by humans, okay? Moose really don't have a ton of predators. They're also eaten by black bears. But in a food chain, we'd only be talking about one of the pathways, okay? Where we're talking about only they're eaten by humans. It's not really a super complete way to represent something. We can just kind of show this relationship here, but we're not talking about everything together. And so that's what happens with a food web is now we add all these other things that are going on. Okay, we had all these other things that are going on. And so it is highly complex. Okay, it is highly complex. Sorry, I meant to just underline like that. And so it's really difficult to understand what's going to happen if a certain animal's population goes down or becomes extinct. But we should be able to predict some of these things, just like we do with food webs, or excuse me, with food chains. All right, so the arrow, again, we're going to point this out. The arrow is the thing that's being eaten, okay, to the thing that's eating it. So if you follow, the moose is eaten by the black bear. The moose is also eaten by humans, okay, and other things. These different insects are eaten by bats. They're also eaten by songbird, I believe that says. You just got to follow the arrows and you can understand what eats what. All right, so keep that in mind moving forward. All right, let's look at another food chain. I'm just going to move myself over there now. Sorry to distract you with that. But we have our food web here. And so basically what we're going to do is I'm going to ask you questions like what happens if the snake population it becomes extinct? There's no more snakes. Okay, well, what's going to happen to our food web? Well, now that there are no snakes, okay, the population of salamander is going to go up. Why? Because there's something that is not eating it. Like the salamander used to get eaten by the snake, you know, because of this arrow here. Okay, that's not happening anymore. So there can be more salamanders. Okay, same with the mice. Okay, the mice, their population is going to go up. All right. Now, if the salamander's population goes up over time, okay, as this ecosystem, I'm only going to make you do one level. Okay, typically one level. So we're talking about, all right, the snakes are not eating these golden crowned kinglets anymore. Okay, so their population is also going to go up. Well, if you keep following, okay, the population of the mice go up. Okay, the population of the salamanders go up. Well, those mice are also going to eat oaks and acorns. So their population is going to go down. Okay, because more things are eating them. All right, their population is going to go down. That's no good. Whereas the salamander, there's more salamanders, so there's going to be less of the pine border. Okay, there's going to be less of them because there's more salamanders to eat them. All right, whereas our birds, okay, now we thought their population was going to go up, but over time it might be closer to staying the same because they're losing a resource in these bugs here, but they're gaining one because the snake was eating them, right? And so basically just keep that in mind as we move forward, that there are some, it can get really complicated really quickly. So just keep that in mind. All right, here we go. Moving forward. We're going to have you watch this video on, I think you guys already watched it. We'll see. All right. Here's an example. Here we go. We're talking about food webs. And so some of the questions that we'll ask you are in this food web, the goshawk, okay, we're talking about this one right here, okay, is eaten by the great horned owl. Okay, that's why we have the arrow pointing to the owl, because the energy is going to the owl. Okay, what two animals eat all the plants? Okay, so you have to take the plants, you got to look at them all, and you got to follow the arrows. Well, one goes to the red squirrel. Nice. Another one goes to the snowshoe hare. Nice. Another one goes to the snowshoe hare. Another one. Another one. Okay, is that all of our plants? Is that all of our arrows? Done. Done deal. All right, what two animals eat all the plants? That would be the red squirrel and the snowshoe hare. All right, that's how you'd solve that problem. All right, so let's keep on moving. All right. So again, we're looking at food webs. And so they're very, very useful in figuring out what may happen, okay, when a species is removed, okay, but we never know for sure. Okay, that is something that I really want to stress. We never know. We never know for sure. Ecosystems are so complex; it's really, really difficult to see the patterns of removing one organism. What's going to happen to the rest? Okay, if a species is removed, the number of animals that would normally eat it would decrease. Okay, so if we remove, like we talked about, like we have grasshoppers. And they are eaten by, I guess we had snakes in the earlier example. Okay, if they're eaten by snakes, but we get rid of all the grasshoppers, okay, get rid of all the grasshoppers, they're all gone now. The population of snakes will go down. All right, it will dwindle because they do not have as many resources anymore. All right, they don't have grasshoppers to eat, so they got to find a different resource. And if they don't fill that, then some of them are going to die because there's not enough resources for them. All right. So make sure that you keep that in mind moving forward. The introduction of, so not only can we remove things, okay, speaking of removing things, I just want to erase, okay, not only can we only remove things, but this one's really, really key because you see it a lot and you guys may have heard these examples in the news, but when we're talking about introducing new species, okay, instead of removing, we're adding, okay, and so that is going to be invasive species. All right. And that is also going to dramatically alter the food web. Okay. Because if you remember earlier in the slides, we talked about a niche, right? A niche. No two animals, okay, can have the same niche. Because if they both have the same niche, then they got to compete. Okay. They got to compete. And out here in nature, there's going to be a winner and there's going to be a loser. And the loser is going to have to find new resources or they're going to die. Okay, that's how it's going to work in an ecosystem. All right, so you can't have two things trying to do the same niche. Let's keep on going. All right, so let's look at this example. And what I want you guys to do, again, I want you to pause the video, but I want you to solve this problem. So I want you to think to yourself, what would happen if the rusty crayfish was removed? Where's the rusty crayfish? It's difficult to see, but he's right in the middle. And luckily, all the arrows, all the things that he eats, all the things that he eats are shown by the arrows. So you see, the crayfish eats a ton of things. It eats almost everything. All right, keep that in mind as you go through your answers here. But what would happen if you remove the aquatic insect and the aquatic plant? Okay, that's going to be our second problem. All right, so that'll be our second one. Don't worry about that yet. I want you to work on this one right here. So what would happen if the rusty crayfish was removed? 3, 2, 1. All right, if the rusty crayfish was no more, okay, if, let's say, humans came and fished or overfished the rusty crayfish, they wanted to have a ton of what do y'all call it? Crawfish boils. Okay. They're very good, by the way. I finally tried one. But you have a ton of crawfish boils and there's no more rusty crayfish in this particular ecosystem. Okay. What's going to happen is whatever the rusty crayfish eats, their population is going to go up. So we take out the rusty crayfish. What's going to happen to the picker eel? Well, their population is going to go up. What's going to happen to the bass? their population is going to go up because they're not getting eaten by the rusty crayfish. Okay, what's going to happen to the aquatic insect? They're going to go up. The aquatic plant, the worm, the leech, the snail, okay, they're all going to go up because those are all things, including the minnow, those are all things that the crayfish was eating. All right. Now, nothing ate the crayfish. All right. Nothing ate the crayfish. So we don't have any populations that are going to go down because they're losing resources. All right. We have a lot of populations that are going to go up because of it. All right. So what's going to happen to the native crayfish? All right. What's going to happen to the native crayfish? I'll give you just a couple seconds. Okay. 3, 2, 1. Well, if we remove the rusty crayfish, okay, the native crayfish is going to have a ton more food, okay, in the way of these aquatic plants, okay, but it's also going to have more predators. All right, so it really depends on the hunting habits of the bass and the pickler eel, okay, because they're going to need more resources now that there's more of them. All right, so we don't know exactly where this native crayfish is going to go. We would need to collect data to understand what exactly is going to happen to the native crayfish, if it's going to go up or stay the same or go down. All right, we'd have to collect a bunch of data. But thanks for trying that problem. Let's talk about what would happen in the second one here. What would happen if we removed the aquatic insect and the aquatic plant? Okay, so the aquatic insect and the aquatic plant, they're right here. What's going to happen if they are gone? Okay, goodbye. There is a herbicide that is being created for like humans start. I always blame humans because usually we're the source of a lot of problems in ecosystems. But let's say a certain type of sunscreen that people are using, when they go into the lake or the water, it rubs off and it kills these plants somehow with the chemicals that it produces. Okay, so these plants are gone. What's going to happen to this equation now? All right, well, number one, anything that eats these two things are out of luck, right? So the native crayfish, they're going to go down because they have less resources. They might even go extinct. They might die, okay, because the only thing that they eat are these two down here. Okay, that's the only thing they eat. So if they're gone, sorry, native crayfish, you might be dead. All right, now you see the rusty crayfish is a little more diverse in its diet, okay, and so it'll be okay. The population will go down, all right, but it'll still have other options. Whereas the native crayfish only has one option here. Native crayfish might actually go extinct. Now you can see how this is going to branch. Okay, both our crayfish population are going down. Okay, so our bass are going to have less food. Okay, our picker eel is going to have less food. All right. Now, granted, the rusty crayfish is a predator toward all these things, so their population might go up a little bit. Like the worm and the leech and the snail might go up because there are less rusty crayfish. Okay. But so the minnow might actually be okay because its predators are going down in the way of the rusty crayfish and the picker eel, but our worm, leech, and snail are going up. So something that you might want to predict is that the population of the minnows might explode. Okay, it might explode because we have a combination of their predators are going down. Okay, things that eat them, the picker eel, the bass, and the rusty crayfish, whereas its resources are more than likely going to get a lot higher, be way higher. So at least according to this food web. So you can see how these can get really complicated very, very quickly, but you basically got to follow the arrows and follow the energy, okay? Where is it flowing, so to speak? All right, so let's keep on going. You guys are doing great, by the way. Thank you for tuning in and being ready to learn science. I know this is kind of a new system that we got going. I'm super excited to bring these videos to you. So let's keep it rolling. Here we go. Invasive species. All right. We already talked about them, but it's a new species that invades an ecosystem. Okay. An invasive species often has negative impact, okay, on the environment because it's taking up niches. It steals niches. It creates its own niche and takes away from other people's niches. So there might be a few different organisms that are eating something. They all have a little niche. Okay. And now our new organism, our invasive species, is going to take all theirs and get rid of them. Okay, get rid of them. All right. They're going to compete, and this one usually wins. All right, this one usually wins. So keep that in mind. It's going to be replacing existing species and disrupting the flow of energy in the ecosystem. There are a ton of examples of this. And it's really, really interesting how adding one species can really impact an ecosystem. All right, so let's keep on going. This is our last one. Buckle down. Here we go. Energy pyramids. We're talking about this same diagram that we showed before. Okay, we're talking about primary producers, consumers, secondary consumers, and tertiary consumers. But now we're doing, don't worry, the math is not very difficult. Okay, but we're going to say out of all the available energy that the producers make, okay, in this case, bamboo, if we said that was 100% of the energy, okay, the primary consumers or the grubs are only going to get 10% of that energy. Okay, so each level, okay, as we go from here to here, they only get 10% of the energy. So where does all the other energy go? 10% goes here. Okay, 90% gone. 90% gone. We do it again. Okay, because 10% of 10% is 1. Okay, 1%. Okay, where the other 90% of 10 go? Well, that 9%, or, it winds up being 90% of 10%, but the total winds up being 9%. Okay, that's gone. You can see we do that same pattern. Okay, we take 10% of 1, that gives us 0.1. Okay, and where does the other 0.9 go? Well, it's gone. But that is a good question. Where does it actually go? And so what happens is we're going to lose the energy, okay, through heat. All right, so let's just skip. All right, so let's look at another example. We're talking about, again, these pyramids and their energy flow. This is kind of showing you how big each of these stages are. I feel like our other pyramid did not do it justice. So producers are producing most of the energy. That's all you need to know. Kilocalories per square meter per year. That's just how much energy all the plants are making. Okay, so if the total is 20,810, we take 10% of that. That's going to be our herbivores. That's how much energy herbivores, okay, you can think of them as cows, cattle, whatever, that are eating the plants. That's how much energy they have available to them. They don't have 20,810 amount of energy, units of energy, because a lot of that energy is being used by the plants. Okay, the plants have to grow, right? So in order for the plants to grow, they wind up using 90% of the energy. Okay, the other 10 gets transported to our herbivores. Okay, gets transported to our herbivores. Now we do this again. Okay, because our herbivores have to grow and live and move around. Okay, and so 90% of the energy that they have, this 3,368, 90% of it is lost again. Okay, so only 10% gets moved on to the next one. Our carnivores. So carnivores only have 383 units of energy, whereas plants had 2,800 to start with. You can see why the population of things that eat other things is much lower. Okay, herbivores eat plants, right? A different type of organism. There are way less of them because they need to eat so many plants. It's not very efficient. Okay, carnivores, there are less carnivores because they need to eat so many herbivores. Okay, and then we talk about our top carnivores, okay, our tertiary consumers. Okay, hopefully we don't run out of battery. there are very few of them. We're talking about our sharks, we're talking about our lions, we're talking about our tigers. Okay. The things that don't get eaten by anything, there's usually not very many of them because they take so much energy. Because in order to feed one tiger, he's got to eat a certain amount of, let's say, herbivores, cows. Okay. I know it may not be super accurate, but just an example. Let's say the tiger's got to eat 10 cows per year. Okay. 10 cows. Those 10 cows, they got to eat too in order to become the cows, right? To be a full grown cow that the tiger's going to eat. Well, if each of those cows are eating, let's say 10 pounds of grass, okay, so they're eating 10 pounds of grass. You can see how this is going to stack up very, very quickly. Okay, 10 cows eating 10 pounds of grass, there's 100 pounds of grass, just like that. 100 pounds of grass. So, I don't mean to confuse you, but take that into account. Here we go. Where does all the energy go, people? Where does it all go? It all becomes heat. Okay, each trophic level, let me just erase this. Each trophic level, okay, so we have our, at the bottom, just to review, our producers, our consumers, secondary consumers, tertiary consumers. Okay, each level has to move around and do stuff. Plants have to grow and become bigger. Okay, that's why trees are getting bigger every year. Okay, or that's why you've got to keep cutting the lawn. Okay, mowing the lawn, because they're going to use the energy they produce on themselves. Okay, but same with crickets. Okay, when they eat the grass, they're going to use that energy to move around and do what crickets do. All right. Same with frogs that are eating the crickets. Okay, they got to move around and hunt the crickets, so they need energy too. And same with our hawk that eats the frogs. Okay, the hawk still needs energy to move around, fly, to see the frogs, to hunt other things, to produce more hawks. Okay, they need energy and they use it. Okay, the energy that is used is lost through heat. Okay, we need to heat up our bodies, and every time we move around, we're producing a little bit of heat. Okay, sometimes your coach will say to, hey, get loosened up, get warmed up. Okay, that's because you're producing heat as you move around. All right, so keep that in mind. Less and less energy is available as we move up the pyramid. Okay, we kind of looked at it in the last slide, but there is not a lot of energy available for the hawks. Okay, there's not a lot of energy available for the hawks as opposed to the grasshoppers. And so what happens, as you can see here, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 7 grasshoppers, and we only got 1 hawk. Because the hawk doesn't have as much energy, so there can only be 1 hawk. Okay, there's 2 frogs. There's 7 grasshoppers. I can't even count how many algae there are, or whatever plant it's trying to depict here. There's maybe 100. Okay, and so that's kind of what we're getting at here, guys, is the population of all these organisms, depending on what trophic level they're at, you can see a correlation in how many there are. So let's just go on to the next slide, because there's less available energy. All right, there are way more giraffes than there are tigers. Okay, because they have so much more plants available for them to eat, whereas tigers have way less giraffes to eat than there are plants. All right, remember that energy is not passed down very well because 90% is lost. 90% lost to heat. Lost to heat, whereas only 10% gets passed on. And then that happens again. Okay, so of that 100% at the beginning, in this case, that lion is only getting 1%. Okay, whereas 9% is being lost. So we call this the 10% rule. And that's why there are way less biomass, bio meaning life, okay, mass meaning like weight, the amount of atoms that you have. All right, there's way less lions, there's way than there are giraffes, or there are way less giraffes than there are plants. All right, so keep that in mind as we move forward here. All right, we're on to our last slide. All right, so lastly, let me move this again. All right, so the example of the biomass pyramid, this is just kind of showing you, again, we have that same rule applying. I know I'm probably getting really repetitive here, but we have so much less of the biomass because of that 10% rule. Okay, only 10% of the energy is being passed on. Passed on, 90% lost. All right, so keep that in mind. You can see the primary producers, they have a ton of biomass. Okay, and that makes sense, right? There's a ton of green in most ecosystems. All right, whereas you don't see as many of the primary consumers because they only get 10% of that energy. There's less secondary consumers. They're pretty rare to see. And you know what's the rarest of them all is the tertiary, the top dog, the lions, the tigers, the top hunter. Okay, there are less of them because, again, once we do this 10% rule a few times, it compounds. There is not a lot of energy available for that tertiary consumer. All right, so that's going to conclude our notes for the day. Thank you for tuning in. I know it's been 2 full days of notes. Thank you for checking them out. Make sure to go rewind the video, or remember, you can always fast forward the video if I'm going too slow for your liking. But thank you for checking out the video. Really miss you guys. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.